Okay, so we've only got an hour today, so we don't want to hold on too long. Hopefully there will be a couple of other people joining us, but as I said, if you can pop yourself on mute, that'd be helpful. And I think, Jim, did you want to take questions after your presentation, or are you happy to take them as you go along? What works best for you?
I don't know. I don't mind. I think maybe it might be worth me. I wasn't planning on speaking for ages, so it might be worth, if people could hang on, I'll deal with them in a
Yeah,
block at the end. Because sometimes I found doing this before that people ask a few questions and I'm actually probably going to address, not always, but sometimes addressing the question later on anyway. I think probably what I'll do though is I'll talk about ASYE separately. So I'll talk about the development offer and the future first, and maybe we'll take some questions on that, and then I'll talk about ASYE in its final year, because there's been some questions about that as well, I think, hasn't it, from people. So I'll do that
brilliant.
separately.
Yeah,
Don't have slides for that bit either.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So just a quick one. Obviously, this session is being hosted by BASW England, and we're really grateful to welcome Jim here from the DFE. Just some quick little links there that I'll send this out afterwards along with Jim's presentation. But if you're a member and you're not an active member, there's some information in here about how you might become more active with us, and various different groups and things that might be of interest to you. And also our contact details. If there's anything that comes up today that you want to raise any questions or make comments about, you can always send an email through to us on the England email. So I am going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Jim McGee, who you're all here today to hear from. So Jim is the head of professional development, the National Professional Development Offer at the Department for Education, and has kindly agreed to talk through today some of the elements around the early career framework, etc. So hopefully that's what you're all here for. I am now going to hand over to Jim, who's going to run through his presentation, and then we'll open it out for a wider discussion after that. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you very much. Are those slides sharing okay?
Yeah, we can see them. Yeah.
Great. And can people hear me all right? Because I'm kind of in a little booth in the department with terrible Wi-Fi. Sorry, a bit weirdly given I'm actually in the office. So
yeah, sounds good.
Okay, yeah. Great, fabulous. Thank you. Okay, yeah, thanks very much for having me. So yeah, I'm Jim McGee, and I'm head of what we're now calling the National Social Work Professional Development Offer. So as I'm about to sort of describe in a second, this is an umbrella term for a series of individual programs which we're hoping to launch to the sector free of charge from the autumn of next year, so from the autumn of 2027. So just before I start, I'm quite aware that that's not that long away, particularly in terms of your planning horizons, etc. And that I also acknowledge that, you know, I've been to BASW events before, but not for quite a while, and the department, I think, has probably been reasonably, from your point of view, reasonably quiet on some of these things until recently. We have been doing things since the sort of spring, but we were slightly hampered by the fact we had to wait until we had the new early career standards out, which we published, as you probably know, in February. So we've been undertaking a range of things since then, but there's quite a lot of people to talk to and everyone's really busy. So I'm aware that some of the things I'm saying, I mean, some of you might have been to some sessions. I did one at the ASYE, so Social Work Week, for example, things like that. And apologies if you went to that, because this is quite similar material, but I guess I have updates to talk about. But yeah, just to sort of at the start, you know, acknowledgement that for some of you this will be landing quite cold, and our intention is that this is the start of a process in which we're going to be sharing a lot more with you, because obviously, as I've said, from a 27 start, that's not that long to go, and there are some changes. There are some new programs that haven't been offered before. There are some programs that look a little bit like programs you might have been on yourselves in the past. Change coming to the early career area, where we're going to obviously have a new 2-year program replacing ASYE, which I think is probably the biggest change. Okay, are my slides still up there? Yeah, we're still okay.
Yep, we can still see them. You did stick there for a second, Jim, but we've got you back now. So.
Right, sorry, it didn't give me any sense of that. Apologies. Yeah, do say if I disappear. Okay, so this is, I'm going to spend most time, this quite a simple slide, but I'm going to talk around it quite a bit, and then I've got a few other slides with some dates and some sort of timelines and things. So let me just stick on this one for a few minutes. So this at a very high level is what the new offer is going to comprise. So you'll see there are 5 programs. So from left to right, I'll talk about each one in turn shortly. So we have the Early Career Development Programme, Lead Child Protection Practitioner Programme, the Family Help Management Supervision Programme, the slightly briefly titled Leadership Programme, and the DCS Leadership Programme. So that's what's going to be coming. This is as I said, it's a free offer. It's voluntary. You know, these aren't things that people have to do. I mean, you do make provision for your early career social workers, obviously, so this program would replace that. But the rest of the programs are for people beyond their early career and looking to take up various roles in the system, which you can see from the titles there. I think that we're aligning more closely than in the past to the reforms that are taking place in the sector following the care review and stable homes. So obviously we have lead child protection role there, we have a family help role. So just to sort of make clear from the outset, I guess that some of this is completely new and some of it I think is a sort of continuity from what's gone before. So as you probably know, there's a current DCS program which is run by the Staff College, which we fund, and so number 5 on the list there across the bottom is going to be a sort of new version of that, which we're putting back out to tender. Just a few high level things before I talk about the programs individually. So very soon, that's a civil service very soon. So I do mean if possible within the next week or so, we're looking to launch the procurement that would see us offer these programs to suppliers. We're looking to split this into 2 lots. We'd have the first lot would be the first 3 programs, early career, lead child protection, family help, and the second lot would be leadership and the DCS programs. And we're looking for a number of suppliers because of the quite large numbers of participants across these 5 programs to deliver these programs to the sector from, as I say, the autumn of September 2027. So look out for that. We're just getting final approvals and clearances, and then we will be out. We've run some marketing engagement events in the last few months that people might be aware of. Some of you might have come to them, where we were sort of sharing what our plan was with the sector and with interested parties who might be providers, who could be third sector people, could be local authority people, sort of universities. Range of people have been interested in what's proposed. So we're looking to launch that shortly, and then our plan is to have a supplier in place by the autumn, and then they will have a year or so to develop the programs that would then be offered from the September of 27. Okay, so just a bit on what each of these programs is for. I mean, presumably to a point, the titles are self-explanatory, but just to go into a bit more detail. So the early career program, starting number 1 on the left, is the replacement for the current assessed and supported year in employment, or the ASYE program. I'll talk separately about the specific sort of interim arrangements for the world of ASYE, maybe after I've talked about the development offer, and maybe after questions on the development offer, because there are some quite specific things going on. And as I say, there have been some comments we've had about the gap between the end of ASYE and the start of the new program. I'll maybe talk about those in a slightly separate bit to this one. So in terms of the early career program, I think the main, several points to note, I guess. A main one is that we'd be moving to a 2-year program from a 1-year program. This was heralded in the care review, stable homes. We've been talking about it for quite a long time. The feeling was that a 1-year program, by the time you've sort of got into it, ends quite quickly. And while we don't want people to be seen as early career social workers forever, and I know local authorities in particular have a sort of 1-year point where they want to sort of make decisions about probation, and sometimes that's also about pay, and it can also be about the sort of cases that people are being or having assigned to them. We think that there's a need to prevent a sort of cliff edge of 1-year support ending, and so long been proposed a move to a 2nd year, which is also something that teacher early sort of career training move to as well. The 2nd year won't be as much time away from cases as the first. We're looking at probably up to 10% for year 1 and around 5% for year 2. So it's a lesser time commitment, but the idea is just keeping people able to access support as they make the leap into a a challenging and new career, we think would help retain them and also give them access to really high quality training. And we found that some employers had actually already decided themselves to make ASYE a 2-year program. And you might know that we worked with a group of local authorities who were doing that a year or so ago to sort of find out more about what they'd done and what had worked, and the learning and the lessons from that piece of work were very much fed into what we're proposing here. Okay, so that's the early career development program. Suppliers obviously yet to be appointed, maybe up to 3 suppliers probably for that and the other 2 programs in lot 1, as I'm calling it, the first 3 programs on this list, because the numbers of people involved is quite significant. There are, as you probably know, there are up to 2,800 new social workers a year nationally. We'd be looking at around, I think, 500 people on the lead child protection program and 500 to 700 on the family help program per cohort. So around 4,000 people per sort of cohort across those 3 programs in lot 1. Smaller numbers in lot 2, as you might imagine. Just move on then to the lead child protection practitioner program. So this is a new program, obviously not been offered before. The care review talked about the need for some additional training in child protection beyond the early career phase, as I think people remember, and this is our response to that. So very much geared at the role of lead child protection practitioner, those either in the role currently or aspiring to take on the role. This will be underpinned by a new set of standards, which you won't have seen yet, but we've been developing with experts from the sector. And when we launch the procurement for the suppliers to start developing and offering these programs, we will also publish the lead child protection practitioner standards, which this program will be geared to. So that's coming out very soon, subject to clearances, etc., shortly. Okay. Moving on then to the 3 sort of leadership programs, which have sort of, as I say, there is a current DCS one, so very much a parallel there, but family help supervision and the leadership program in some ways reminiscent of the pathways program that I think people might be familiar with, but particularly with the family help program, we're looking to gear that really specifically to the new role, family help teams and the team manager role. There's issues there around, not issues, but the need to accommodate the fact that some of those people will be alternatively qualified, for example, and that they play a very specific role in the system. So we aren't offering the same sort of things we were doing with pathways. We're sort of refocusing it on these specific roles. There's a new national framework rather with standards there that people be aware of. So we're gearing it to that, and also being mindful of the standards that exist for the early career program, the early career standards that I mentioned earlier, and the lead child protection standards. So that's a new program which will also be part of this suite from September 27, and then 4 and 5 leadership program for sort of heads of service, ADs, that sort of person. I think similar to a pathways predecessor probably, but geared to the new national framework and the reforms more generally, of course. And then the same for the leadership program. It's a similar purpose, similar aims, but geared towards the kind of world we're in now, and also recognizing, obviously, I might get questions on this, but there is a local government reform program going on, and so obviously there will be more DCSs than there are currently when that program concludes, and so we're anticipating the greater numbers there by expanding the program to fit. Okay, not too much longer. So just some benefits of the offer. So why are we doing this? I think we've long felt that there's more support we could offer to the sector, and we obviously, some of these programs have antecedents, as you can see, but we're trying to bring them together in one coherent offer that responds to the reform agenda that we've been working on together over the past few years. We also have noted issues around retaining new social workers. Tend to, a bit like new teachers, there's a group who leave quite early, and I think by having a really high quality, nationally consistent program, we can help to get people over the initial period of adjustment to life as a full-time social worker. We also have, obviously, we have a new set of early career standards that we've talked about before, and hopefully you've seen. So the early career program in particular looks to embed those and is now geared towards those standards. And I think, as I've just mentioned, there's a general consistency, national consistency issue here. There are pockets of really good things that we saw when we worked with a group of authorities, for example, on the 2-year ASYE program, but our feeling is that it's just not consistent enough. And why have people reinvent wheels when we could commission really high quality programs centrally and offer them? Okay, so just on timelines then. So we're sort of as we said, May, June to launch. Because obviously we are in June, so it's a tiny bit later than we were hoping, but still broadly on the timeline that we were suggesting. So procurement is due out shortly, lead child protection practitioner standards due out shortly as well. Suppliers appointed by the autumn, September, October probably. Current programs end in the spring of 27. I'll talk about ASYE separately. And then from September 27, we have the new offer rolling out across the country, across all 5 of these programs. I'm just going to say a bit more about the early career program, actually, because I think, as I mentioned at the start of my sort of presentation, this is the one that's really fairly different to the current ASYE offer. So as you'll probably know, that the present world of ASYE, there's no content that we specify centrally, and it's essentially what we've required in the past is a series of assessments undertaken by the new social worker of how they're progressing against the PQS as they are currently, and then that's often that reflection is then sort of looked at and comments are made by an assessor, and there's a process of sort of reflecting on the reflections, as it were. And I think we feel we want to move away from that approach where it's become fairly assessment driven. Wasn't maybe the intention at the start, but I think as these things develop, they end up, unless you're really careful, it becoming the end, almost becoming the assessment process, which isn't really what we were after. And instead, what we're doing really is kind of turning that on its head and making the program, although it's geared to the standards and there will be an assessment, it's going to be much more focused on the content. So it's going to be about, so there's the learn how to statements of the new early career standards, and the program is very much going to be about bringing those standards to life and exploring them. The supervisor still remains central, so it's not a delivered to program in the sense that we recognize that employers aren't going to want their new social workers just to sort of be taken away from the workplace and then return to them. It's very much a based program. It's just the suppliers will be providing the overall structure for it and the sequence through the standards, and then the supervisor and other figures. We've done quite a lot of work on the sort of world in this. I know a lot of people are practice educators, and there's the PEPS training, etc. What we're looking to do though is because that isn't a consistent landscape. Again, we're sort of saying that someone needs to play a supervisory role where they reflect on the standards and the practice of the new social worker and how that practice can evolve and improve to meet the standards, which you might remember are standards for the end of 2 years of practice. And someone else is going to be working probably with when I say probably, it might be someone else who works assessing how the new social worker is progressing to meet those standards, and there'll be a coordinator type person, as is the case now in the world of assessed and supported year employment. So what we're hoping for is a more consistent sort of program across the country. There will be different flavors of it. We think there's benefit in having more than one supplier deliver these programs, and partly because the numbers are really quite large, as I say, but also I think because I think it would be useful to see suppliers have a different go at how they sort of work through the standards and what they focus on. So there'll be an overarching consistency in the department, and bodies working with us will be quality assuring the materials, but there will be different flavors, and employers will have a choice of which ones they would like to take up, but they will all be of a high quality and will all be about the early career standards. In terms of assessment, we think it's important that assessment remains the employer's responsibility, so it won't be a supplier assessing the new social workers. I think that should remain local authorities. And we're currently working with a reference group on how to ensure an assessment regime for the early career programme that is robust enough to give you confidence that your new social workers are performing at the standard that you want them to, but not so burdensome that it A, drives the process, or B, sort of, takes time away from everything else. So we're looking at the outcome statements of the early career standards and a series of what we're calling entrustable professional activities, with things like direct observation, which already goes on anyway for new social workers, as we know, being part of the picture that can then be painted of how well new social workers are performing. We also recognise, just anticipating questions a little bit, that obviously the move to a 2-year programme will be quite a change for local authorities. So we don't want to make this a 1-year programme. As I said at the start, I think a 2-year programme is really, really quite important. But at the same time, if things like probation and pay and the cases that are handed to new social workers is dependent upon them achieving a certain level at the end of year 1, we're looking for the assessment approach we take to have a sort of interim stage, which would be an attempt to sort of give you some confidence that if you're really wanting to keep that year 1 as it is down to employers. I mean, there's nothing we specify on this at all, but if people want to keep year 1 for various reasons as the point at which they sort of make those decisions, then the assessment approach that we'll take will enable people to do that. Okay, there's a few other bits on the side about who's eligible, but I probably don't need to go into that massive detail. So other programme I just wanted to focus in on for a second, and then I'll stop talking and take some questions, is the Lead Child Protection Programme. So I think I've said some of this already, but just to sort of re-emphasise the point again, this is a new programme, it lasts a year, around 500 people per cohort will be going through it. I've had some comments already which I've noted that the demand for this programme and the family help programme, which we're also saying sort of 500 to 700 participants per cohort, we might find that we rapidly get oversubscribed on that. So subject to spending and what funding we can secure, we will be keeping that under review. We're aware the demand might outstrip supply, at least initially, but I think you can see here what we're aiming for a bit here. So people wanting to move into this role, performing at the role already, set of standards to underpin it, to sort of really make sure the Lead Child Protection role is consistently embedded across the country, and building as we say here, a strong pipeline of skilled social workers, capability, competence and professional grounding to progress into the role. So as I say, I think this and the Family Help Team Manager, both recognition of the reforms and the direction of travel that the care review and stable homes has been pointing to for some time now, and we see these programs as responding to that challenge. I think that's the end. I'll stop sharing now. I think that's the end of my slides. Thank you for sitting through that. Sorry, I know there's probably tons of questions, but I think it's good that we've had a chance just to set the stall out a little bit. Should we have a chat now about that stuff and the professional development offer, and then I'll come back in a few minutes maybe and talk about the ASYE programme.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jim. Sarah, I can see you've popped your hand up. So are you happy, Sarah, to speak to the question that you popped into the chat?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I haven't been looking at the chat at all, but I can have.
I'm another Sarah.
A different Sarah. Okay, well, I'll tell you what then, Sarah, we'll go to the chat question first because it's been there for a little while. So we'll deal with that one first. So, Jim, we've got a question here from Sarah, different Sarah, asking, basically saying that a lot of statutory settings decided not to reduce their ASYE programme this year in anticipation, which means there's been a drop in graduating students stepping into ASYE roles. Is there any factoring in regarding there will likely be more students wanting to start this new programme when it's gone live, I presume is the point, or is this entirely up to statutory settings? Likewise, do you have a feel for how those students who've just begun or are about to begin ASYE will be affected?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so just taking maybe the second question first. So people who've started ASYE won't be affected by the new early career programme. They'll finish ASYE. So our last entry for ASYE is February 27. And so anyone starting with the local authority on a 1-year ASYE programme funded by us will complete that in the spring of 28, and then that will be that's their early career programme. And it will also be based on the current PQS, because we don't want to muddy the waters. I mean, if people want to look at the new early career standards and think about what that means, and obviously in many ways they're not completely different to the PQS, they have some different emphases and they go into a different level of detail maybe, but they're not completely separate, as they're not totally separate from the PCF either. Then that's up to them. But yeah, the people who start ASYE would finish ASYE and they wouldn't go on to like year 2 of the early career program. I think we just have to have a point we finish one and start another. On the first question, I'm not sure if I totally understand it. Are you talking about people not being employed and therefore they're not on ASYE, or do you mean being held back by the employer so they can start the early career program and not do ASYE?
It sounds to me, having read it, and I don't know if that Sarah wants to come on to maybe speak to it themselves, but it sounds like a bit of a concern in relation to newly qualifieds who could have or should have been able to start an ASYE programme now, but that employer has decided to pause all ASYE activity until the new system has gone live. So actually what happens to those people who potentially they're not really newly qualified by the time the new model is implemented?
Okay, no, thank you, that's really helpful. Well, the requirement is that people have to have been qualified in the last 3 years to be eligible for the new early career offers. So in theory they could be held back to go on that program. I think I have heard, though, on previous discussions, employers being a bit anxious about holding back people too long, and I don't think we'd really encourage at all people sort of now to be sort of saying, well, I won't put people at ASYE, I'm going to hang on for this new offer, because that's obviously quite a long time away. There will be a small gap, which I'll talk about, because I think I will get questions on that, between the end of ASYE and the start of the new program, which would require, as it stands, people to be held back for a little while, although there's things I think could be done, but definitely wouldn't be encouraging anyone to sort of essentially opt out of ASYE now at this point, because I think which isn't necessarily what the question's saying. I kind of understand, but I sort of think what most authorities are doing and what we want employers to do is to keep with ASYE for the next period until February 27, until we then have a small pause before we start the new program.
Thanks, Jim. I think that probably does answer. But I suppose it looks like from that comment that some employers actually have decided to pause, even though they've been advised not to do that. So thanks for that. I'll come to Sarah Parker next, and then we'll come to Mel's question, which is in the chat.
Thanks for reaffirming that. I run the Social Work Academy for Northamptonshire Children's Trust, as you can see. We'd already sought advice, and we have 3 cohorts a year because we run an academy. So January, May, September. So I've taken a cohort in May, I'm taking a cohort in September, and I'm taking a cohort in January. So I will still run the ASYE programme, and you've just confirmed that the advice we sought and what you've just said totally affirms what I'm doing is okay.
Good. Yeah. No, it absolutely is okay.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions. One is, we have step-ups within Northamptonshire, and they would normally come into my cohort that starts in May.
Yeah.
So they won't be able to start their ASYE. I know in the document that was published in February, there was a separate section on step-ups, because I remember reading it, and it said sort of more information to follow. So my first question is, what do we do with the step-ups? Because obviously they normally apply to the academy. They don't get an automatic place. They still have to apply. But I need to decide whether we do start them in the May, or whether, yes, we have to hold them up till the September. That's sort of my first question.
Yeah.
And what your thoughts are on that, because I know you have already thought about how we manage step-ups, but I don't think there's been any final answer on that one. So that's my first question. So I'll leave that one first, and then I've got a second question.
Okay. So I shall come back on that. Okay, sure. So just this is sorry. I mean, we're kind of getting on to the second bit I was going to cover, but that's completely fine. I'll just talk about it now. So just a bit of preamble on all this stuff generally. So So we'd thought that it was quite a good idea to have a gap between the end of ASYE and the start of the new programme. And we did have a group of ASYE coordinators that we sounded this out with a year or so ago. And we had a series of options, really, sort of almost like Goldilocks stuff. We had on the one end, you can have a gap of a year, which is a really long time. It would store up a big load of people to do the early career program and would therefore have a very expensive and very large first cohort. We didn't think anyone would really want that either, and that didn't really seem sensible. We then had a sort of, you could have, well, no gap at all. And we thought at the time, and we did get some validation from the people we spoke to in the sector, and there's quite a few of them, there's about 70, 80, I think, that they thought that would be too, not chaotic as it were, but it would just be too complicated. So you therefore have, you know, people starting on the 1st of July on, for example, on ASYE, and then the 1st of September or whatever of September, you would have a different group of people starting the early career, but they're sort of in the same group. So employers are managing two different programs to two different sets of standards simultaneously. So we therefore decided on a sort of middle option of 6 months, which we felt was a big enough gap for it to sort of allow a bit of breathing space for employers to get their heads around the new program, which, as I've said a bit in this presentation today, is going to be quite different. And there'll be guidance on the assessment process. There'll be some suppliers to choose from. There'll be materials to have a look at. You know, it's going to be quite a different program. I mean, hopefully it will be a really, really good program, but it will be a change from ASYE. No matter what people have presently been doing. So we thought the 6 months sounded quite sensible to us and to the people we talked to. But then, as you say, there are groups of people who arrive at different points, aren't there? There's always little peaks and troughs throughout the year. There's a really big peak, obviously, in the autumn when the graduates arrive, and there is quite a big peak in the spring, as you say, when the apprentices arrive and step up people. And it takes a while for them to get their SWE number, doesn't it? So we've basically ended ASYE as it stands just before that quite, I mean, nationally it's about 500 people, I think. You know, it's not vast, but I appreciate for employers, if you've got 10 step-up people starting in May, for example, what do you do with them is the question, isn't it? And I think as it stands, there are a couple of options. But we are thinking about this, I should say, because we didn't mean to cause people undue sort of like distress, as it were. Like we chose February to say, because quite a lot of people drop out within a month, and so we wanted a way in which we could check that people hadn't disappeared, as it were, and stopped doing the program straight away before we started paying people. So it's February into a March, if you like, start. And just to mention as well, sorry, I'm sure people know that we don't have Skills for Care working with us now either. So this final year has been a bit DIY, and we've published the materials, which I think authorities are quite familiar with, but we published all the stuff ourselves, and we've got some grant windows for people to apply to. So that was another reason really for the March date. Actually, it kind of fitted quite well with financial years and things. But sorry, the question, what do we do about it? I mean, the first option is that people just have a supervisor who works with them on the new standards to prepare them for the start of the program in September. That obviously works to a point, but it's, you know, you've got to find the time for that to happen. The grant funding wouldn't be there in that period, and also, as people have said, the length of time a step-up person is then on. I mean, this will only be for this cohort, but I appreciate it is real for them. But in theory, you could therefore have a step-up person starting in May 27 who actually does sort of 2.5 years on an early career journey, because they've had a sort of 4 to 6 month window waiting, and then a 2-year program, which is a long time. I accept that. I think, as I say, the second year would be relatively lightweight, but if there are decisions around what they do next and what they progress to, I appreciate that's quite a long time. So that's one option, is that you just work with them and kind of wait. The second option is that basically you start them on assessed and supported employment yourselves, but it's not funded by us, which I imagine wouldn't be wildly popular. So you'll be free to do, in theory, what you wanted up to the start of the new program. But I imagine without the grant funding, that wouldn't go down brilliantly. So we're considering, I should really emphasize the word considering, whether there's more we can do and whether we should extend the deadline for the end of ASYE as a funded program to capture this group of people who fall into a little bit of a limbo before the new program. and we're just thinking about that internally and about whether we can find the funding to do it, which isn't a guarantee, to be honest. But I appreciate there is a sort of issue with this group of people who will be waiting longer than others for the end of their early career journey. So sorry, Sarah, that totally answer your question, but that's the sort of just quite a long preamble on what we're wrestling with and what we're trying to work through.
And I really, really appreciate that, because you're just being transparent, which is why we're in this forum, and that's what we need. And as you say, you've got step-ups that are finishing, and then if we don't employ them to September, what are they doing between May and September? Because some of them will need employment, hence their step-up. They'll need employment because they've got mortgages and bills to pay like everybody else. So that's really
you could still employ them though.
Yes, I know. That's what I'm saying. We could still employ them as NQSWs. We'd have to go through the interview process though. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. And the second. Go on.
Well, just really quickly on that. I mean, I just think that is quite an important point, because I have heard some people saying, well, we might have to hold off taking these people on. And I mean, I really don't think that's the case, because presently the induction is all, or the the early career, but it's not mandatory. You have to have mind to the standards there, the early career standards, but the form in which you do that is down to yourselves. So and if someone starts, and I appreciate there are things like probation, and there are decisions that employers make about having most often it's a year, I think, isn't it? But it can be shorter.
Yeah, we do a year.
But and I'm not suggesting that it's really easy just to rework those arrangements. And sorry, I don't understand passive aggression. I'm really, really keen not to, but they are things employers have decided they want to do with these people. They're not requirements we make of them. So I think you do have the flex yourselves to do different things. I mean, you might decide that's quite risky, and you want them on the program, and you want to have a year and have an assessment and check that things are all fine. But it is within the sector's gift to do something differently for those people. I think it's probably, I wouldn't want people to think they have no choice but to sort of hold off taking people on because there isn't a program immediately for them to go on. I mean, I think in our view that's not where we are. But we also recognize that there is a problem here that, given we were never going to, we always want to have a program available for new social workers. So there wasn't ever going to be a sort of gap where there was nothing. So we're trying to manage the overlap between one world and another. And obviously it's tricky to do that, in a way that's totally satisfactory to everyone, I guess. But we are thinking more about it. Sorry, Mr.
Yeah. And the other thing you said when you were doing your presentation, you said that we could keep the one year programme. So does that mean they could complete their assessed year still within the 1 year, and then we just do the second year, whatever that looks like? Could they complete still within a year?
No, sorry, that's not quite what I meant. I meant that, just as saying a second ago, that employers all have their own arrangements about when they deem it sensible to sort of give people the extra responsibilities or extra pay, and it tends to be after 1 year. So having a 2-year program, a 2-year early career program is a challenge for that process. I mean, obviously one answer is to have a different process, but I appreciate 2 years is quite a long time and people might not feel they want to move to that. So I was saying that basically within the world of a new 2-year early career program, we're looking at making the assessment in year one, at the end of year one, suitable as a staging post for you to feel comfortable that the changes you want to make to people's pay or responsibilities could be reflected. So we're not suggesting you that the program is completed in 1 year, not 2. It's just that we would give you something to sort of work on based on the standards that helped you assess people at that point. But we still would very much want people to go on to the second year of the program, and the standards themselves, as I mentioned, are set at the 2-year mark. So they are deliberately quite challenging.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Sarah.
That's okay.
So we've got another question here, and this one is from Mel, and it's what support from the local authority is expected for the lead child protection practitioner and family health management support program? Will there be an assessment element for those, or will attending the training be all that's required?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We're still working through the assessment arrangements actually for this program. So we think we'll be talking. Well, we think we'll be talking to suppliers when they're appointed. Our thoughts generally are, I think, that we would want something that was again, I mean, probably the same sort of spectrum that I was talking about for the early career program, in the sense we wanted the assessment to be robust enough to be meaningful and useful, but not so onerous that it took absolutely tons of time. So perhaps sort of case study type work, for example, where people are given a sort of open book exercise where a fictional scenario is presented to them, that they are, you know, you have now been appointed to this role. What's the first thing you do in the first 2 weeks of being in charge? Is a, you know, is a fairly common way of doing it. We think that will probably be supplier assessed, because that's tended to be how these programs have been run in the past. So we probably wouldn't have these as a new employer assessment, unlike the early career program, where we're sticking with supplier led, with local authority supervisors and really strong input, and the assessment being by the employer. We think it'll be supplier led. So obviously those materials, you'll want to see those, and that will be part of the decision you're making to send people on it. But broadly speaking, I think the answer is that for the lead child protection, family help, the leadership, and the DCS, the main thing for employers to think about is sort of who to send, can you afford the time on the program, etc., and how will their learning, you know, be useful to the your kind of, you know, your sector and yourselves and the organization people working when they come back. You know, that's the main consideration. So it's the time of the sort of individual is the main factor. As I said, the programs will be free in themselves to employers.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. And we'll come to Holkar next.
Hi, Jim. Thank you very much for sharing. I have 2 questions. I will try to be as briefly as I can. So the first one is my classmates and I, we belong to a master's in social work program that we are expected to graduate in February next year. So the earliest we can register would be around March, we expect, and there are around 35 of us. So I would say that, you know, this gap does, you know, have a huge impact on us, because we are not part of, say, Step Up or Frontline. So we have even less sort of guarantee or assurance when it comes to postgraduate employment. We heard that perhaps in some organizations, what they would do is they as you know, even in the past, is that for people who are waiting to register, they would employ them in alternative qualified roles. So they might hold the title, say, social work assistant, but they will be paying as in the same way as an NQSW does. So we were wondering, because as you know, external candidates, we're wondering. We know the funding does help a lot. So, you know, in the meantime, will there be some consideration as to whether DFE would provide some support to employers that decide to employ us? You know, even, you know, perhaps not holding the title of social workers as such, but that would at least give us, you know, some employment pending the new program, because we simply cannot fit into the timeline of the existing ASYE. And the second question is, you know, many among us, you know, might have, you know, special educational needs, or they might be disabled or neurodivergent. And in the past, we have sadly had stories where ASYE's year has not been that has been quite challenging for those social workers. So as the new standards are rolling in, will there be more mandatory training or mandatory standards for assessors that they need to understand in terms of how to reasonably accommodate NQSWs with special needs or with a disability? Thank you.
Sure. Okay. No, thank you. So 2 quite different things. So just on the first of your points, I think as I've said before, I think there is a need to separate out what's employers. Sorry, I always say employers, but I suppose in this forum we're mainly talking local authorities, aren't we? But I'm using the terms interchangeably a little bit. Sorry, partly because the early career program, there are some people eligible for that who are not local authorities who engage in statutory social work. So sorry, maybe I'll say local authorities if that's probably easier. The sort of, I mean, I'm not trying to sort of back away from your question, but the department really doesn't have any role in how local authorities recruit social workers. And also, just going back to the questions that I was talking to Sarah about a second ago, it's not contingent from our point of view on employing people for there to be a sort of early career induction type program for them to go on. That's not a requirement. Local authorities are free to recruit people as they see fit with the budget they have and the skills they want. And then obviously it's really sensible for them to then, as new social workers, have a program that's structured to help them to sort of get to grips with the new role. But it's not, from our point of view, a condition of employing people if that program is run, and the form it takes isn't set by us either, as I mentioned. So my hope would be really with both your question about people doing masters and the step up people, that local authorities still employ people as they need to. And then if there is a small gap before a program starts, say in the September, we'll probably have cohorts going. I don't think it'd be a rolling program in the future, by the way, but I think like you were saying, so with your sort of January, September, May, we'll have at least a September and a May intake. We'll see if there's a January one too. So this won't occur in future, but I just think for this one cohort of people, I get different people, postgrads and step up, etc. I think there is just a sort of need to have something work through, which, as I say,
Has Jim frozen?
Correct the problem by moving to a new program. Oh, sorry, did I freeze?
No, you're back.
Am I back?
Yeah,
did I go for long? Sorry, how long was I gone?
Literally about 2 seconds.
It's like time traveling. Like 20 minutes I've just been.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just reaching the end of my answer. Sorry, to the first question that you had, which is just that I appreciate we've caused the issue by changing the program. I totally accept that, and I know it's great for me to sit here and sort of say you have to sort it out in the sector, but I do think that there must be a way for people to have a bit of support when they arrive, and then they can start the new program when it starts in the autumn. And I wouldn't want, and we're not absolutely at all requiring anyone's recruitment to be paused while just because there's a pause in the induction. I mean, the two are linked in a way and really important, but I don't think there's a world in which we're not saying that you shouldn't recruit people until there's an induction program for them. You should recruit people and support them as best you can until there's a larger program that we're going to be bringing in to help them. Just on your second point.
I think for us is the grant, and what we think is, because if we were to compete for alternatively qualified positions as newly qualified social workers, we are competing not just with fellow students, but with experienced social work assistant, experienced support workers, etc. So then, for employers to want to employ us as opposed to someone who is alternatively qualified but more experienced, I think it would just be nice if there is some incentives for them to do so.
And the grant you're talking about is the grant that we pay for ASYE. Is that the grant you're referring to there?
Yeah, so the money that pays to employers for employing ASYEs.
I mean, it's quite a small amount per person. It's sort of 2,000 per person. So, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking to see if there's more we can do for this period. Because, sorry, I'm not, as in my response to Sarah, I do see the problem we've created. I do think, though, that, as I say, that there must be, and I see there is a comment in the chat there about budgets being very tight and coming to something new. I accept that, but I still think it could really be as straightforward as I mean, you have to have a supervisor when you're employed, I think, or someone who is your point of contact. We'll have some self-assessment materials as part of the new program that we could in theory make available if they're there, for people to have a look at the new standards and think about the areas that they really would want to focus in on, that they think their prior experience would either prepare them really well for, or probably much more useful things that they think they might struggle with. And then there is a world in which for a few months I think there could be discussions with your new supervisor stroke team manager, etc., about getting some experiences and reflecting on how you might in time meet those sort of areas of the standards that are more challenging for you. And so I'm not saying there has to be a whole bespoke program launched. I think there are things that could be done to support people through what is going to pass quite quickly, a 3-4 month period. If you get your registration in May, the new program will be September. I mean, by the time people have had a bit of leave, that's not a huge gap, is it? Is what I'm like. Just on your second question there about really good point about the need for the current program to be accessible for people who are completely, you haven't seen the specification that we're about to launch to the market for them to submit their tenders to, but we are super keen on that, and we want to make sure that as far as possible the program can be suitable for people who require various adaptations. And you also mentioned, I think, training for the people who will be supporting the program, and we do see supervisor training as part of what the new early career program will offer. So do completely hear you on that. It's a really good point, and we are thinking about it.
That's great. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
And Jim, we've got I'm just conscious there's quite a few other questions, but hopefully we'll be able to squeeze them all in.
Yeah.
So we've got another one here from Mel. Could we offer the ASYE to the step ups following all the paperwork and processes that we do now for our current NQSWs, albeit not then externally moderated, if the LA agree to fund it for that small group?
Yeah, I mean that's the second of those two approaches I was suggesting, barring us being able to find funding ourselves. Yeah, I mean absolutely, you're completely free to do what you like really for this. And I think given ASYE is a program that people are familiar with, has been running for many years, I know it's not ideal, and the grant funding, as we're just hearing for the previous question, is a factor and it's important to people. I do accept that, but the kind of definitely is a world where you can do what Mel's suggesting in the chat.
Thanks. And then we've got
just really quick on this. I should mention. I mean, some authorities move to 1-year intakes, which I know doesn't help if you haven't. Sorry, but I'm just offering the fact that not everyone is in the same boat here. I think it depends on the sort of structure you're presently operating, and it's not the case that everyone is struggling with it. I think it's a reasonably small amount of people who it just hits them, particularly because of the way they're set up. I think sort of Tower Hamlets and elsewhere have a sort of annual intake, which presumably means that people are having to do something else for quite a long time before a program, but they do manage it. Okay, sorry, Denise.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, some of the other activity on the chat is more comments, but we do have a direct question from Sarah Hill. The ECS 6 new standards are similar to the PQS. Unsure how the additional 159 individual learning statements would be considered within. Yeah, are these to be evidenced?
Yeah, the short answer is no. So they're there to show you the sort of things that would need to be learned, understood, and the skills, if you like, the sort of learn how to that would be important as ways in which sorry, I've quite a long convoluted statement here. I'll start again, maybe make it plainer. There's the 6 standards, which are the sort of business, in a broad sense of social work. You have the 3 first standards of sort of relationship and comms as bedrock of everything, planning and assessing, and then intervening, if you like, to make a difference in children and families' lives. That's the first 3 standards. The second set of 3 are sort of how you might do that really well. So we have anti-discriminatory practice, we have a sort of reflective sort of learning approach, and then we have multi-agency teams. And so what we're saying is that that's the business of the 2 years. They're the things that the program should cover. We then, below those 6 standards, have a set of outcome statements. There are 20 outcome statements that sit underneath the 6 standards, and they're the things that the assessment is hooking onto. They're the ways in which you demonstrate the high level outcomes. And then the learn that and learn how to statements, there are loads of them, as you say. I would, in our defense, say it's a lot shorter than the version we consulted on by about half, but there's still a lot there. They're really there to sort of show you how those outcome statements could be achieved, and the sort of scenarios and circumstances that apply. So it's not the case that the course has to teach every single statement individually, and it's not the case that the assessment regime has to show all of those ticked off in any way. It's a higher level composite than that.
Great, thanks for clarifying that, Jim. We've got a final question from Isabel, and I'm actually going to tag a question of my own onto this, but I'll deal with Isabel's first, because it does relate to the one that I have. Is there going to be any consideration of a version of this programme for newly qualified social workers that don't work in statutory settings or undertake statutory duties? So, for example, social workers in the VCSE sector, working in schools, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a really good question. I think this comes up as well in relation to the family help teams as well, because not all of those people, as you well know, I'm sure, will be qualified social workers. So I think there's two answers to this. I think in terms of funding a new program, that's going to have to be a sort of longer term ambition. I think in the short term, though, we do plan to publish the materials, or a substantial of the materials that the suppliers will be developing. So while this isn't a perfect response, I accept, it would be the case that the self-study materials and the supervisor prompt things around key matters within the early career standards would be available for people to access for free. And I think there's a world in which they could be adapted and used by employers to provide additional training for people who are not going to be going for the whole sort of suite of standards. This does apply for some statutory bodies as well. There's a question like CAFCAS, for example. Some of the 6 standards they cover really, really, really deeply, and others they don't touch quite so much because their work is, you know, by its nature quite specific. And I think this applies to people who are doing social work type things but are not qualified social workers. So we would make the materials available for people to use in the short term, but I think there's a longer term question about whether that's sufficient and whether we need to do more, which I think we're going to have to be taking away and talking to ministers about.
Thanks, Jim. So just kind of building on that question, I know in Isabel's question she references skills for care, but my understanding is that for other parts of the sector, the DFE will take in management of the ASYE funding programme, the wider programme for adults and for children and families, for social workers working in children and families that are not employed in local authorities. Is that correct?
So the Department of Health runs that program.
The Department of Health are going to do for adults, but are DFE going to manage it for the VCSE sector, for example, the ASYE programme, or will it all sit with DHSC?
No, so from September 27, there won't be any DFE funded ASYE program. The only ASYE program would be offered by DHSC. So the offer from us from September is just the early career development program.
Okay, so essentially, rather than it be skills for care managing that now, it will all sit with DHSC for the ASYE program. With that in mind, if somebody, because we get this question a lot, this is why I'm specifically asking.
Yeah, no, sure.
If we get, say, a social worker who starts their career in, say, for example, the NSPCC, and they've started to undertake the ASYE program, we're thinking maybe 2028. So they're on an ASYE program because they don't fit for the early career framework. And if they then decide to leave that role within a year or two and start a role within the local authority, will a new pot of funding be available to them, or will that original pot of ASYE money be considered their money, that's it, they've had the funding and therefore they wouldn't be considered for?
So the first program would that be a DH?
DHSC.
That'd be a DH program. I think, to be honest, that if they change role and they're within the 3 years qualifying, I think they would be entitled to the early career program. If they'd started the children's ASYE, they wouldn't be, and if they were over 3 years qualified, they wouldn't be. But I think if they moved, they would still be entitled to the early career program.
Okay, because we do have, several instances whereby people maybe have started with a charity sector, started their ASYE, things haven't worked out particularly well. They maybe didn't work through their probation, and that funding pot has then been lost, and they've not been able to then move on career-wise to kind of undertake NQSW at a different organisation, undertake their ASYE with a different organisation. So I suppose this potentially could open, and in some instances it hasn't, obviously we hear one side of these stories, but in some instances it hasn't necessarily felt like it was an individual's issue. It was maybe an organisational issue that led to that situation, or a lack of support in the workplace, etc. So potentially this offers some hope to individuals, maybe, where that scenario, if it happens in the future, there may be alternatives for them to potentially access funding to continue.
I mean, I'll double check that, but I think that would be what we'd want if people were moving into this sector and we had a quite different program now that was of a different duration, involve a totally different set of standards, it would seem sensible that they were eligible for it, wouldn't it, really? Because we are unhooking from ASYE. Well, you know, and obviously there are questions about that, and that's been raised before, but obviously there are now two different programs of two different durations of quite different structural approaches now in adults and children's, with the introduction of the new 2-year early career program.
That's really helpful. So with the final question, because I know we need to wrap up now, but in terms of the offer from the DHSE, then will that be just one ASYE offer, or will there be differences within that in terms of if you're predominantly working with children and families or predominantly working with adults?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a minute through. Well, just
sorry.
a little bit for me. Sorry, probably not for anyone else. This is my dodgy connection. I didn't quite catch all of that. But
so will it be just one
repeat
homogenous offer of ASYE through the Department of Health and Social Care? And appreciate it's a different different department to yours. Or will there be a differentiation out, do you think, within that ASYE offer for non-local authority children and family social workers and adult, predominantly social workers?
My understanding at present is that there aren't any plans to change what currently happens in adults. I think there are thoughts maybe about future spend reviews and whether they look at more broadly at the offer there. But I think for the time being, whatever currently happens is what's going to happen in the future, which isn't a totally satisfactory answer. So I'm not entirely sure what happens, but I don't think that there are any new plans to do anything different in the short term to distinguish, I think is probably the point I'd make.
So potentially a CAMS, say social worker, for instance, they would just undertake that generic ASYE.
I think that's what happens now, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think at the moment they're still undertaking the children and families.
Sorry, there might be children's, but
ASYE,
because it's not statutory, they wouldn't be eligible for the new program. So yes, I think they would move to the adult one. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jim, and thank you to everybody for joining us. Appreciate it was your lunch break, but thank you for your input today and for all the activity with the questions and comments. It's been really helpful. And potentially, Jim, maybe we might run a part 2 to when you're ready, or is it the right time to look at the next steps career-wise once we've kind of that'd be really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate there was lots of questions, so thanks for bearing with us.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.